The Outskirts of Vizima are my favorite part of the original Witcher. They are a perfect introduction to the universe and could easily stand as a Witcher short story on their own. But there is one thing that bothers me about them. Abigail. Was she as innocent as the game wants you to believe she was? Just because some old witch, a lake-dwelling demigoddess, and a mind ghost said so? There is far more to this story than meets the eye. The beast painted the outskirts crimson. In this video, I'll try to repaint Chapter 1 into even darker shades of grey. Before we take a deep dive, we need to recap the events of Chapter 1 and, most importantly, Alvin's trance. So, the outskirts of Vizima are haunted by the beast, a hellhound commanding hordes of bar guests. Although a demonic dog doesn't sound too scary, Berengar, the witcher who passed through before Geralt, thought the beast was an Alzur's demon, or at the very least confirmed all features of such. Alzur's demons are pretty much Greek mythology ripoffs. They ask a question and lose most of their power if answered correctly. With the help of Abigail, Alvin enters a trance and allows Geralt to communicate with the beast. There are two important things to mention here. First off, according to Time of Contempt by Andrzej Sapkowski, one does not lie in a trance. Second of all, the international version of The Witcher shortens some dialogue. Dangerously so at times, even to the point of omission. This is the case with a few crucial parts of Chapter 1, so I'll be doing the translation whenever necessary. In his trance, Alvin vividly recounts the crimes that took place in the village.
Abigail, boję się. Dlaczego oni obdarli pieska ze skóry? Dlaczego go skrzywdzili? Piesek był dobry, nikomu nie zrobił nic złego. I ta dziewczynka z domu za wioską krzyczała. Tak strasznie nieludzko jakoś.
This part is mainly okay, but there is one problem. Girl should be translated as little girl here. Melitele knows who and what event he meant though. Maybe some cut content?
Niegrzeczne dzieci! Znowu znęcaliście się nad szczeniakiem wiedźmy?
This might be far-fetched, but szczeniak is also a derogatory term for a young misbehaving boy. In such context, znęcaliście się should be translated as you've been bullying.
Za karę nie dostaniecie dzisiaj kolacji!
Obviously, this part is missing the cruel parenting part. I think up to this point, Alvin talks about the children in the village. They say children are cruel, but if you listen to the outskirts children play or talk to them, you'll see how disturbing they are.
Kill my uncle. He's evil.
Teach me to kill.
I'm a salamander.
I don't want to be a guard.
Me neither.
Let's play slitting throats instead.
How about the beast comes for you?
It seems even children are wicked in this place.
Płynie niewinna krew, bratnia krew. Śmiechy mężczyzn i krzyki kobiety. Złe twarze, wykrzywione alkoholem i pożądaniem. Rżnij ją, pokaż jej, że jesteś mężczyzną. Złoto, złoto splamione krwią. Rodzi się bestia.
There's a lot to unpack here. Alvin clearly talks about the major NPCs and their crimes, but the interpretation makes a huge difference. Now, the most obvious one is that he speaks of Odo, Mikul, and Haren Brogg. But this is too simple, in my opinion. I think he either means multiple people and events under umbrella terms, let's call them, or I simply have an alternate interpretation to offer. You see, with innocent brotherly blood, Alvin refers to the massacre of the villagers suffering from the plague, ordered by the Reverend. Family murdered family, neighbors murdered neighbors. As for Odo, he might have not killed his brother, mind you, and I'll talk about it later. Then, Alvin likely speaks of Mikul and his gang, but I have doubts if he meant Mikul raping Ilsa here. Rather, Alvin meant sexual violence in the village as such. If you look at the events of Chapter 1, it looks like sex offenders make half of the population of the outskirts. Finally, with bloodstained gold, he could mean Haren Brogg. He did trade with the Scoia'tael who killed humans after all. On top of that, Alvin was a source, so he might have been able to see into the future where Haren rats the Scoia'tael out and then trades with the salamander. But he could have also meant Abigail, who aided the villagers in their shady business by selling them poisons, love potions, and who knows what else. She did it for gold and maybe out of contempt too, wanting them to kill one another. Then, Alvin proceeds to talk about morals and the beast talks through him too. The translation is so-so at best and much shorter than the original. So here is my take.
Śmierć, kara ostateczna. Kto na nią zasługuje? Kto jest winien? Kto umrze? Bestia już raz umarła. Nie boi się śmierci. Jest śmiercią. Jak chcesz pokonać ludzką podłość, łowco bestii? Mieczem? Ty, który umarłeś, a wciąż chodzisz po żywych. Powiedz mi, kto jest winien? Kto mnie wezwał?
The Beast demands Geralt specifically to answer the question, and both of his possible answers are very questionable, which I'll be exploring in a while. In any case, having defeated the Beast, Geralt tells Shani that the Beast was unknowingly summoned by the townsfolk and their wickedness. He then adds that even a skilled sorcerer would have a hard time creating a being this powerful. Whether the Beast simply fed on the evil or was sort of a punishment for it, we'll never know. So, what's your problem, or what's your point, you ask? Well, in later chapters, the story explicitly says Abigail was innocent if we let her be lynched. In chapter 4, the soothsayer in Murky Waters says you can't help Alina's spirit pass on because you have innocent blood on your hands. The Lady of the Lake seconds that. Finally, in the epilogue, Abigail's vengeful spirit attacks Geralt. Although in this case, I'd argue Jakes the Aldersberg, who knew both Abigail and Geralt, is playing mind games on the latter, guilt-tripping him. How? Well, a friendly reminder, the whole scene is an illusion and Jakes the Aldersberg and Alvin are the same person. Now, on to challenging the story. Abigail was guilty, and she had a hand in the summoning of the Beast. It's just a question of capacity. After all, in Abigail's own words, there's a monster hiding in each and every one of us. The question here is, who exactly is Abigail? She plays such an important role and yet we barely know anything about her. At face value, Abigail is the village soothsayer in the Outskirts, but don't let appearances deceive you. After all, even Keira Metz in The Witcher 3 posed as one for a while. I strongly believe Abigail is in fact a priestess of the cult of the lion-headed spider. And it is as bad as it sounds. It's a cruel deity of suffering, sudden death, and intrigue who demands bloody sacrifices from his worshippers. As you can guess, the cult must operate in secret almost everywhere in the world. Nevertheless, it does have members hiding even among high-ranking officials. It's a bit like Fight Club, which doesn't exist. While this is just my theory, there are several hints in the game that support it. First, if lynched, Abigail curses Geralt and the villagers in the name of the lion-headed spider, and priestesses of the cult are known precisely for their powerful curses.
Przeklinam cię.
Nie będę się w to mieszał.
Przeklinam cię, biały wilku! Przeklinam was wszystkich! W imię lwiogłowego pająka czarnego legby!
Admittedly, she doesn't say anything specific that could trigger a curse, but then again, she could have been silenced by the villagers before she could. Best case scenario, she was a worshipper, which is bad already and implies a bunch of unpleasant things. Second, the cult has a meeting place in Vizima. This could be a coincidence, of course, but the place is definitely a remnant of a cut quest. Still, it's no evidence on its own, as the cult is decentralized and has no official hierarchy. Individual congregations rarely contact one another. As a result, they often differ in various ways. But bear with me. Another hint is based on A Grain of Truth, a short story by Andrzej Sapkowski. In it, Nivellen, a man who became a monster as a result of a curse, recounts a raid on a temple. He says how it clearly was an evil temple, as there were skulls and bones at the altar and there was a green smoke in the air, which stank horribly. There, Nivellen raped a young priestess. She cursed him, calling him a monster in human skin, and killed herself. Nivellen then turned into an actual monster and only true love could break the curse. Geralt then tells Nivellen that it was a temple of the lion-headed spider. Undoing a curse cast by a priestess of the cult was beyond his expertise. Now, let's recall Geralt's encounter with Abigail in the cave before they confront the mob. She is performing some magic which apparently smokes and smells horrible, although the smoking part was omitted in the translation.
Co ty tu robisz, Wiedźminie?
A ty, wiedźmo?
Czary czy nie? A co?
Strasznie śmierdzą i dymią te twoje czary.
Bo to potężne zaklęcia i składniki. Muszą wystarczyć na całą wioskę.
Then, if Abigail has her way with Geralt, obviously to sway him, her sex card is outright creepy. The skull, the blood, the trinkets, and so on. I know witchers are immune to STDs, but in Geralt's shoes, I would have cast Gwen just to be sure. But in all seriousness, Abigail has an altar with human skulls and bones at home, and it's not like she could get those at a prop shop. All of this feels almost out of place looking at her character model, but this is very likely intentional. The cult was very secretive for a good reason. Its glossary entry explains it. It says that, quote, Temeria strives to eradicate belief in the lion-headed spider, and the cultists are tried as murderers, unquote. Of course, The Witcher reuses character models like crazy, so it could be a financial thing too. Still, Rise of the White Wolf, one of the most popular mods for The Witcher, gives Abigail a much creepier look, so I'm not the only one thinking something is up. The next hint comes from Wiedźmin Gra Wyobraźni, a pen and paper game from 2001. For your convenience, I'll call it a game of imagination. Now, the game was not written by Sapkowski, so it isn't canon, but neither are the computer games. I think it's a very interesting addition to the Witcher lore nonetheless. The sourcebook says people who worship the lion-headed spider suffered some terrible tragedies in their lives, such as losing a loved one. The cult also draws in people who deal with death on a daily basis and love to make others suffer, such as soldiers, torturers, or bandits. Sounds like poison makers fit in too, wouldn't you say? Anyway, the priesthood are handpicked from the most devout followers of the faith. How is it relevant to Abigail? Well, at the Lynch, the Reverend says that Abigail is not part of the community, likely meaning an outsider or an outcast. He then adds that she should have left years ago instead of seeking revenge for her otherness and the bad fate that befell her.
Abigail nie należy do naszej społeczności. Mogła się stąd wynieść dawno temu, ale wolała zostać i mścić się za swoją inność i zły los, który ją spotkał.
Sadly, he doesn't elaborate on either. I really hate that her backstory is kept from us like that. However, there is something that looks like an urn at her home, so it could be a lead. Not convinced yet? No worries, we haven't even gotten to the best part. There is something, or rather someone else at her home that we need to talk about. Naturally, I mean Alvin, who is looked after by Abigail and then the Reverend. I get the feeling people commonly think Abigail took Alvin in out of goodness of her heart. However, she explicitly says that she sees potential in him. Potential for what? Well, a game of imagination mentions that the cult has seers of sorts. Their job is to enter trances and interpret visions sent to them by the lion-headed spider. Most importantly, seers are being prepared for the job since childhood. They are taught in the ways of the cult and, here comes the creepy part, bitten by the cult spiders periodically. Over time, they become immune to the venom for some purpose, probably. Of course, I don't know if this is what Abigail had in mind, but she is not selfless. She wants Alvin for something. Incidentally, the Reverend claimed he wanted Alvin to be his successor in the future. Of course, he turns him to the salamander in the end, and we have no way of knowing if he was honest about his original plans for him. Still, the parallel here is anything but accidental in my opinion. Speaking of the Reverend, I'm going to play a devil's advocate. That is, I'm in no way trying to absolve him for his numerous crimes, but being a wicked man doesn't mean he can't be right about the wickedness of others.
Wiedźma wykorzystała Oda i Harena do swoich planów. Ponadto otruła Ilsę. Abigail nie należy do naszej społeczności. Mogła się stąd wynieść dawno temu, ale wolała zostać i mścić się za swoją inność i zły los, który ją spotkał. Manipulowała prostymi ludźmi, posługując się czarcią magią. W końcu przyzwała bestię. Taka jest prawda!
Granted, the accusations sound far-fetched at face value, and the circumstances and the delivery do them no favor either. But let me tell you, there might be a grain of truth in them. Let's start with Haren Brogg, the scumbag who traded with the Scoia'tael, snitched on them, and moved on to trading with the Salamander. He claimed it was Abigail's fault that he started dealing with the Scoia'tael because she promised he would get into her pants this way. Frankly, I don't know which is worse, that it was a terrible lie or that it was the horrible truth. But for argument's sake, let's say he was telling the truth. How to connect Abigail to the Scoia'tael though? The only thing that comes to mind is that they came to her, a reluctantly tolerated outcast, to find a way to resupply in the outskirts. So, Abigail arranged a deal with Haren. He was an opportunist but also a coward though, so she applied her signature negotiation technique. Offering sex for favors is very much like Abigail, but there might be a darker secret involved. You see, a game of imagination describes some spells of the cult of the lion-headed spider. One of them is Modlitwa o Sekret, which means prayer for a secret. It's a divination spell of sorts, which allows a priest to see a vague, unclear vision of a person's shameful secret. This way, once decoded, the priest can blackmail the victim. Where's the catch? Well, for starters, the spell takes a bloody sacrifice to the lion-headed spider. The priest also needs a piece of the victim's body, specifically nails or hair or their body fluids, saliva, tears, or semen. The easiest way would be to go with hair, but this seems difficult with Haren Brogg. Let's just say Abigail had but one way to get the required components, without raising suspicion, that is. In other words, it's not impossible that Haren tells a half-truth. He did start dealing with the Skoyatel because of Abigail, but the sequence of events and his true reasons were different. But you can't expect the guy to spill his guts among a bloodthirsty mob, can you? With Haren out of the way, let's talk about Odo. He accuses Abigail of trying to screw money out of him and his brother, allegedly threatening them with curses. This is where the translation fails again.
Ta suka zniszczyła mi życie! Chciała pieniędzy! Groziła klątwami! Brata mi zaczarowała! Mojego brata! Chciała mi go ukraść z jego złotem! Brat jej nie chciał, więc go zamordowała! Czary na mnie diabelskie odprawiła! Kontrolę nad rękami przejęła i zabiła podle zdradziecko! Do dzisiaj śni mi się ten dzień! Brat pracował w polu! To takie straszne! Zamordowała! Więc trzeba ją zabić!
And we are supposed to believe it's possible? Well, I hate to be the ancient aliens guy here, but yes it is. At that point in the story, it might seem preposterous, but again, for argument's sake, let's try to think differently. A game of imagination features a spell called Urok, which means charm. It allows the spellcaster to assume control of the victim in a sense that they do the caster's bidding. However, they apparently retain some consciousness as they will defend themselves or run away if attacked. Could that be why Odo remembers the murder? But this isn't everything. There's also a spell called Spętanie Pamięci. That's a tricky one. Binding of memory? Anyway, a lion-headed spider's priest can alter the memory of their victim. She could have tampered with Odo's recollection of the events. Although the bigger the alteration, the bigger the chance the victim sees through the deception. Could this be the source of the mismatched puzzles in this story? Well, one of the pieces is on the translation. As you already know, according to Odo, his brother was working in the fields when he was killed. He likely meant the garden in front of the house where Odo's dog is howling. Although there is a field right there too. Anyway, I think this is, in fact, Odo's late brother's dog mourning the loss of its master. Obviously, this is also where the two echinopsae which Odo wants Geralt to get rid of are. According to the glossary, echinopsae are, quote, monstrous plants born of curses which grow in places where terrible crimes have been committed, if the crime in question was never atoned for. One of the elderly villagers says something similar, though she says they grow where murdered people are secretly buried. This is a big clue, but we cannot investigate. Is Odo's brother buried there? Or some of his belongings? Granted, if Odo was to dispose of his brother, killing him in his sleep at night would be the easiest way. He could then bury him in the garden in the dead of the night. But this makes no sense at all because Odo's story is no secret. He wouldn't need to secretly bury his brother, so I think this is where Odo's brother was murdered, not buried. Sure, the fact that Odo asked the Salamander thugs how he could kill a warrior is sus. But Geralt insinuating that Odo killed his brother in his sleep is just that. An insinuation, and a weak one at that. Why? Look, it doesn't matter how good a warrior you are when you get, say, backstabbed by a person you trust. I mean, you can kill a witcher with a pitchfork. How difficult would it be to apply the same tactic against an unsuspecting retired soldier? Abigail, on the other hand, was no stranger to using her charms and casting curses. Most importantly, we can find Odo's doll on the altar in the Abigail's hut. The Witcher toolset explicitly calls it a voodoo doll. In pop culture, such dolls are used to hurt, curse, or even control someone. Geralt with complete memory or the witch hunter Graden might have shed some light on the matter, but yeah. It could be a red herring, sure, but I think it's either bad design or something was cut. One thing I'm sure of is that not being able to investigate a clue this big feels really cheap. Again. So, we don't know how. Do we at least know why? Well, Abigail did have a motive. She hated the village and its inhabitants. She surely wanted a better life, and getting a wealthy husband was the easiest way to achieve it. Failing that, she could try to extort the man. Outcast or no, money opens almost every door. On the other hand, Odo did have a motive too. Maybe his brother was more receptive to Abigail's charms than he let on. So it could be greed and jealousy, but Odo also hated soldiers and his brother used to be one. Mix jealousy and greed with drunken rage and you have a murder on your hands. Sometimes all it takes is a heated argument and one unfortunate shove. I'm leaning towards blaming Odo as this version is more grounded, but let's not forget this is a fantasy setting where magic actually exists. We can't rule Abigail out simply because she said so and put out. She's manipulative and we should take everything she says with a grain of salt. Finally, let's talk about Mikul, another one of the Outskirts' finest. He accuses Abigail of poisoning Ilsa, and again, things get tricky here. While Mikul is no stranger to sex assault, Ilsa's case is a bit fishy. See, the Salamander recruits at the end of chapter 1 say they assaulted Ilsa. Neither the original nor the translation explicitly states that Mikul participated. If anything, they suggest Mikul and Ilsa were an item or at least knew each other. What's more, Mikul did claim he loved her and seemed distressed at the news of her death. As stupid and vile as he was, even evil people are capable of love. That's the oddly beautiful thing about it. Although, let's be clear, rape wasn't beneath Mikul. Remember Carmen? Mikul and his gang assaulted her and got her pregnant years ago. She was then cast away by her father, the Reverend. Anyway, something doesn't seem right about this story. At the very least, I don't think Abigail told all of it. I think it's probable Abigail helped Mikul. In the cave, she says villagers used to buy love potions from her.
To moi klienci, wszyscy zaopatrują się u mnie w trucizny, eliksiry miłosne i insze wywary. To ich sprawa, jakich używali.
If alive in murky waters, she says she is making a love potion too.
Did you post this notice?
About the Devourer's teeth? I need 10 for a love potion.
In other words, liquid sex assault as far as I'm concerned. Who's to say she never sold one of them love potions to Mikul as well? It doesn't change anything if he did what she says he did, of course, but definitely puts her in a different light. So what she likely did there to protect her image is a lie of omission. A classic. Of course, to really drive her point home, Abigail offers Geralt sex. With an angry mob waiting outside the cave, mind you. But you have to be daft to think she did him because she liked him. When she no longer needed Geralt to save her, she politely tells the simp to sod off when he tries to go for round 2 in murky waters.
Abigail, remember the cave?
The past is past, nothing more.
At least, he didn't end up like the guy lying on the ground and paid when we first visit Abigail.
Ah, my stomach hurts, cursed witch! Ugh.
By the way, have you ever been in so much pain that you couldn't even stand? It's no regular tummy ache. This looks an awful lot like Dotyk Yadu, a touch of venom, another spell from A Game of Imagination. At any rate, Abigail may have played a bigger part in Ilsa's death than she admits. I always thought it was suspicious that Ilsa went to the crypt, drank the poison, and then conveniently left herself to the corpse eaters. It looks an awful lot like trying to get rid of the evidence, aka the body, or awfully lazy writing. I'm not saying Abigail carried her there, but somebody could have. I mean, it's obvious she wouldn't want to be connected to Ilsa's death. But yet again, Geralt just took his finding at face value and called it a day. Seriously, in chapter 1 we commit crimes against due diligence. Now, the problem with the chapter 1 story, and my deep dive for that matter, is the lack of hard evidence. We make a life and death decision based on exactly what? Rumors? Accusations? And a surface level investigation. As a result, we cannot even give a well-informed opinion, let alone render a fair judgment. On top of that, we are only given 2 poor choices at the moment of truth. How are we then able to defeat the beast? I think this begs the question, is the beast truly an Alzur's demon? After all, both answers to its questions yield the same result. Sure, depending on the answer, the fight is easier or harder, which I explore in another video. This could be a hint, but it might as well be purely gameplay design thing. In the end, the beast is slain and so are most of the villagers, guilty and innocent alike. This suggests the beast is not an Alzur's demon, and thus the answer doesn't matter. But on the other hand, the beast could be an Alzur's demon, in which case the whole thing reeks of a plot hole. Abigail was definitely more guilty than she, or the game for that matter, led on. And yet, she is called innocent on several occasions later on. Although, I can think of one explanation that makes sense. Assuming Berengar and Abigail were right, and the beast is an Alzur's demon, we cannot answer the question correctly. Ergo, the beast still has powers. By saying only the villagers are guilty, we answer the question wrong. By walking away, we give no answer at all. On top of that, we become complicit by knowingly allowing a lynch. Abigail was innocent until proven guilty, and we failed to ensure justice was served. I don't even know why it's an option, honestly, because Geralt contradicts himself this way.
It's clear why the beast haunts you. I need to expose the guilty.
Everyone listen, there is to be a trial. A trial, not a murder. I've had enough of your pathetic problems. You can wallow in this crap yourselves.
Curse you, Witcher!
I want no part of this.
I need to judge the situation fairly, therefore I refuse to judge it, solve it among yourselves. The more I think about it, the less sense Chapter 1 makes. Man, it will never be the same again. Case closed? Not exactly. There is still one big problem with the Outskirts. See, the problem is that Chapter 1 handles choice poorly compared to the rest of the game. Both options leave me feeling I didn't solve anything, or that my choice didn't even matter. I really wish Abigail was handled more like Raymond Marlowe. Did you know you can uncover Azar Javed disguised as Raymond in Vizima? Not at the swamps, in Raymond's house. Such a brilliant but very easily missed scene. I'm not saying we should find something decisive because moral ambiguity is the point of this subplot. But why give us only two choices? Not even wrong ones, just bad ones. And yet, one of them is deemed correct when it's clearly not. I feel we can only side with Abigail or remain neutral, but not really. If I played the game for the first time today, I'd feel misled. It's like you side with the mob but then act neutral out of the blue. I really wish there had been a third option to really side with the villagers. A viable option that you take with some conviction. This is the point of a quest with no evidence damning one side and clearing the other. Conviction, not knowledge. I feel we have neither in Chapter 1. Honestly, I'm surprised myself at where this deep dive has led me, both in terms of conclusions and changes in how I perceived Chapter 1. It took way more brainstorming and rewrites than I originally anticipated. But now I think I'm ready to do what Geralt failed to do. I have no doubts that Abigail was guilty too, and her wickedness contributed to the summoning of the beast. She helped the villagers scheme against one another. She sold poison to a traumatized girl. She never reported or did anything about any crime in the village. She's manipulative and self-righteous. To make things worse, she did all that for coin and out of disdain for the people of the Outskirts. Those things are easily proven and they alone damn Abigail. On top of those, there are leads and my suspicions and theories that beg investigation. Even if not legally a criminal in Temeria, and we don't know what other crimes Abigail could be linked to, morally she was just as vile as the villagers she felt so superior to. Of course, it's not impossible that she genuinely thought she was innocent. Evil people usually don't consider themselves evil. But how could anyone possibly think her innocent is beyond me. It's insane even by ancient or medieval standards. For example, in the Roman Empire, she'd be likely tortured for selling poison alone. Aside from witchcraft, she could also be executed for not reporting a serious crime against the state. I mean Haren Brogg supplying the Skoyatel here. Although, bear in mind, I'm not a historian, and I'm already simplifying like crazy. In general, Chapter 1 feels as if it was made later than the rest of the game, and CD Projekt ran out of resources before they could do it right. This would explain why we barely scratched the surface of big leads. Were they loose ends that needed to be tied up quickly so the game could ship? The symptoms do remind me of Neverwinter Nights 2, which was absolutely butchered. Maybe we'll never know for sure, but I do hope The Witcher 1 remake will expand and enhance Chapter 1. Well, I've just ruined my favorite part of the game for myself by making this deep dive. But you know what was the saddest part of making it? Realizing that countless innocent people have been wrongfully sentenced to death throughout history, or have wrongfully served long sentences, including life. Hopefully, The Witcher 1 remake will give us a true moral dilemma that stays with us until the credits roll. One we either stand by or keep questioning regardless of NPCs scolding or praising us. This, I believe, is the essence of the Witcher universe.